The decision whether or not to have kids is more than an important issue for a marriage. It's a deal breaker. I mean, so is drug addiction for a lot of people, but whatever. When it came to kids, I'd always just assumed Kelly felt the same way I did. But of course, that turned out to be untrue. And when it did, we didn't talk about it. And so long as I had my pills, I could keep telling myself that someday she'd change her mind. The foot of my fake leg was solid. It was only from the ankle hinge to the calf that I had room for pills. Sanding the insides sacrificed a little strength, but provided extra storage. I could fit about 500 pills in my leg at once, enough for 20 days at a stretch. That gave me 3 weeks in which to score another 500, which I'd get, as we got everything, by bartering. At least Rayner taught me one useful skill. And when I scored the next 500 pills, well, I'd hide them up above the removable ceiling tiles in the bathroom. Finding hydro or an equivalent opiate like oxycodone or, if I was really desperate, codeine had been easy on the ex-resort islands in coastal African cities. Hell, the trip east through the Mediterranean, Malta, Ibiza, I considered hacking off my other leg and hollowing it out for more storage. However, by the time we reached Cinque a group of 5 small villages on the Italian Riviera, I was stuffing rolls of toilet paper into my fake leg to prevent the loose pills from making my leg sound like maracas. The space above the bathroom was empty. Then Captain Mystarian had announced no more stops between Cinque and London. He'd winked at me while he was saying it, thinking he was doing me a favor. He'd overheard me complaining about the Mediterranean islands, but that had only been to convince Kelly I wasn't attracted to the girls. I'd said everyone there smelled bad and didn't use deodorant. Like that matters when they're naked and you're high. In any case, I only had 47 hydrocodones left for the next week or so, and 24 pills of morphine. Doctors originally prescribed opiates as cough medicine. You stop feeling like you have to cough. Pretty much you stop feeling altogether. Eventually, your body gets accustomed to having the drug, and so it stops doing certain things on its own, like not being in pain and not having to cough for no reason. So when the cruise ship pulled into Monterosso, I was coughing my lungs out. My back muscles ached like I'd spent the past week rowing the cruise ship from Greece. And to make matters worse, every time I'd lapse into another coughing fit, Kelly would pound on my back, then ask if I needed some cough medicine. From the ocean, the 5 Cinque Terre villages looked like 5 packets of upright rectangular chalk. The pieces of chalk were Cinque Terre's tower houses. Pastel pieces of chalk worn down to random lengths, as though by a small child holding them in their fist while drawing on a sidewalk. Nearest to shore, the pieces of chalk only peekabooed above the waves, but further inland they rose up to back trails, connecting all 5 villages. Callie had suggested we hike the back trails from Monterosso to Rio Maggiore, meaning that we'd walk from one side of the coast to the other. I'd agreed, but stipulated that we had to part ways at some point so I could go down into the villages for cough medicine. Callie always liked it when I followed her advice on matters such as my health. The idea of finding medicine seemed feasible too, seeing as the Cinque Terre villagers had somehow warded off pirates without Captain Mystarian's help. The rising waters had swallowed their docks and most of their boats, but Cinque Terre remained a fishing community. In fact, despite having to move operations a little ways up the cliffs, the villagers were thriving, and everyone had a shorter walk to work. When Callie and I got to the middle village, Callie spotted a waterlogged pastel blue building with the word chemist painted on the door. Chemist is what Europeans called pharmacies. We were high up in the hills on a trail, and yet somehow she could see it way down below. She turned my head from the top, pointing her arm over my shoulder and saying, "There, you see it now?" I followed her line of sight, but I didn't see anything. I nodded anyways. "Do you really see it, or are you just nodding because you're embarrassed?" "No," I said. Kelly laughed. "No, you can't see it, or no, you're not embarrassed?" "No," I said again. "Okay then," she patted my shoulder. "Just keep walking that way." I walked in the direction she'd pointed until I could duck behind a crumbling stone wall and remove my fake leg. My fingers trembled. I was hours past the time of my normal dosage, but this dose was different. For this, I'd fasted in the morning and made sure I was alone. Getting pills from the chemist was only a secondary priority. This was a test. I didn't know how I'd react, but the idea was to make the 24 pills of morphine I'd acquired in Greece last as long as 200 pills of hydrocodone. So, like 8 days. I spilled half the leg into my lap on accident and almost panicked. I froze. I collected my thoughts, then I collected all the pills and put them back into the fake leg. The morphine was in a prescription bottle. I took 2 pills out and placed them on my tongue. I swallowed. Then I got up and started walking. It took about 50 steps for those pills to kick in. Here's what I remember about morphine. It was as though the rest of Antarctica had melted. The oceans rose up, and over my head. But guess what? I could breathe underwater. When I moved in slow motion, and my skin felt warm. It was this warmth that I suspected of having melted the rest of Antarctica in the first place. Up ahead, I looked down over the top of a jagged cliff and saw a small group of local children playing soccer in a clearing below. Wanting nothing more than to lay down and watch, I surveyed the area for a comfortable spot, but everywhere was rocks. Sharp, inhospitable rocks protruding from the earth like the lower teeth of an animal jaw. Plus, it was getting hard to focus. My vision kept skipping like the horizontal hold on my old television. However, when I looked around again, the rocks did seem flatter, rounder, smoother, more comfortable. Only one way to tell. I picked a good view and sat. No, not sat, sank. Sank into the cliff like it was an old piece of furniture molded to my body over many years of sitting in front of that television. The rocks punctured my clothing and scraped my back, but no matter. Nothing mattered. And yet, everything, from the gentle breeze to the blades of grass and how they smelled, mixing with the ocean air, to the sounds of kids playing soccer, it all drifted up to me from the valley below, and everything made me content. Gazing down from my cliff, I felt totally absorbed in all things great and small, and yet, at the same time, indifferent to every outcome. I felt like God. That's how morphine felt that first time, like being God and watching a soccer game. I even started to cry a little without even realizing it, and when I noticed, I was like, what the hell? I never cry, but I didn't care. And at the same time, I thought it was pretty cool. About the game. The boys must have ranged in age from 7 to 15, but they all played together. Every once in a while, a boy would touch the ball with his hands and play would stop. Every once in a while, a boy would kick the ball between 2 piles of clothes. Then that boy's team would cheer. To be honest, I always found soccer kind of boring. Not enough scoring, but the morphine made me realize something. It's not about the goals. It's about everything that leads up to the goals. All those close calls, those intricately threaded passes and chip shots, those saves. Soccer is a lot like life. 99% of the time, you're not scoring. Hell, 99% of the time, you don't even have the ball. It's what you do without the ball that makes you a good player. Moving into position, anticipating the pass. If you can do that right, then when the ball comes to you, you'll only need one touch. I don't know how long I watched those boys play, but by the time I got up to leave, their shadows had elongated to the point of being distractive. The morphine had worn off. It hadn't lasted as long as hydrocodone, but it had felt much more intense. Intense enough that I seriously wondered what heroin would feel like. That's when I knew I had to get rid of that morphine. I mean, heroin? No, I wasn't going down that path. I wasn't some kind of fucking drug addict. Instead of hiking back up to the trail, I made my way back down to the beach, or rather to a street that ended where the city suddenly disappeared into the ocean, and took the bottle of morphine pills out of my pocket. Was I really going to throw these into the ocean? Yes, I was. I decided. If I was ever going to make a decent father someday, I had to be able to look my kid in the eye and say, son, I threw that morphine into the ocean and never gave it a second thought. It seemed pretty simple. Probably I was still high. I cocked my mechanical arm back and prepared to throw when just then I saw it, that chemist shop, and by now it was closed. It was only a split second, but I had to marvel at how the hell Callie could have seen that chemist shop from all the way up on that trail. And then my arm followed through, and the bottle left my hand, and I watched it soar out over the water, a tiny dark spot against the cloudless sky. 15 seconds later, I was swimming. Forget all that stuff about making a decent father someday and looking my kid in the eye. Those were the furthest thoughts from my mind. You know what I was thinking? I hope that bottle floats. I didn't even care that I was in the ocean at dusk. I wouldn't have cared if I'd seen a fucking dorsal fin.